Emily Elizabeth, and I'm the host of the What Fulfills You podcast, a show for and about individuals always seeking to be their best selves. On this show, we talk all about building the mindset, finding the right careers, creating meaningful relationships, and so much more. Welcome to the What Fulfills You podcast. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the What Fulfills You podcast. My name is Emily Elizabeth. I'm your host. And today's episode is focused on the 3 things that I actually did in my early 20s that I would indeed repeat again. So this question is actually something that I take from whenever I speak at my alma mater at Chapman University in Southern California. I often get asked, what would you tell your younger self or what you would do differently? And I always kind of smile because I think I was very lucky to experience a low point in my college time where I was going through this breakup and just didn't have any kind of emotional support from family or anything, which this is actually like a side tangent too. For those of you who grew up with immigrant parents or just parents that have such a generational or cultural gap with you that they might not understand, just something that's human, right? Like when you're in your 20s and you go through like a breakup, whether it's friendship or romantic, I, in my experience, kind of came to terms with the fact that, like, this is something I find funny too, by the way. I can say this with more laughter now, but, I think sometimes when your family comes from such different times, like mine, they were immigrating to the US during very hard times of the Vietnam War. And so for my parents, I think particularly like my mom, I think she found breakups to be like, okay, what the heck? Like, why are you so sad about it? Like, just get the fuck up, right? And look, I think there's places, there's a time and place for, tough love, but I think that's something that I learned actually, ironically, in the future, the way I helped my friends and even someone I call like my younger sister now, I very much learned how to just sit through it with them as a friend rather than sit there and kind of judge, like, why is that so difficult for you? Because I experienced that in my early 20s. And later on, I found and discovered that it's sometimes a common experience for a lot of children of immigrant parents. And so this is a special shout out to you guys if you are listening and that's relatable to you, where there are certain experiences that you've had, especially growing up in the US or just Western culture in general, that your parents didn't emotionally support you whatsoever. Just know that I'm here and I've been there and I'm acknowledging that for you. So anyways, I share about like that low period in my life when I was 20 years old going through a first breakup, because that period of my life enabled me to really focus and get my life together. I focused on building my mental health. I focused on building myself physically. I focused on using my time in college wisely. I focused on, at the time, like building my first business, like actually scaling it. I took it from an eBay store, which was a thing at the time, to actually making my own e-commerce website and actually selling direct to consumer and then expanding into retail stores, So I very much just took the time to really throw Emily into so many different things to get her footing again. And so looking back, I don't have too much that I necessarily regret that I wish I did. And so this episode is focused on 3 big things that I did do, which has led me to this position I am in now, and things that I would repeat again and would encourage you to think about and also utilize in your own approach, whether you are in school or whether you are recently graduated at any point in the recent years. This is all applicable. So the one big thing that I did in my early 20s that I highly would recommend all of you to do, especially if you are interested in your career and you are ambitious in just building the best life for yourself in whatever capacity, I highly recommend to try different jobs. That includes internships, that includes unpaid work, yes, even unpaid work, That includes different side jobs. That includes, maybe trying something for yourself, whatever that is. But especially if you are in college right now and you are in a lucky position to not have to focus on paying for school on your own, which, gonna put it out there, I recognize that that's not always the case for everyone, but for some of you, that is the case. If that is, please, for the love of God, take advantage of your time that is so free and use it to try every single thing that you are curious about, because by the time you graduate or by the time you're 2 years out of college, you will have enough experience to know deep down, okay, this works for me, this doesn't work for me. Oh, I really liked my experience at this job, or I didn't really like my experience here. So that will help you narrow it down. And when you narrow something down, such as what am I going to do after college, or maybe you're 25, you're a couple years out of college and you suddenly have a little bit of a crisis. What do I do right now? Well, when you are able to narrow something down a little bit more in a refined way, you have a little bit more direction. With a little bit more direction, you will feel less lost. So, for my backstory, when I was in college from 18 to 22, I actually had a part-time tutoring job, and I would reframe it and say, yes, I was tutoring, but I was tutoring at the time when I met her and her twin brother. They were 7 years old and I was 18. And so all that to say, it wasn't that I was tutoring hard things, but it was rather that I was helping them with additional work. It was a family that values and valued academics and just being able to, stay ahead of the curve. And in that part-time job at surface level, you think, what am I going to gain besides money? I was making $15 an hour, and then later on, I think they increased it a little bit, but I was working, I think it was 5 or 6 hours a week really in that job. And what I really gained from that particular job wasn't not just, my side cash money, but it was learning about the essence of life. I was inside a home of an incredible, incredible example of a family. They have all the values that I later on realized I also value. The mom embodies qualities that I also embody. I mean, maybe she's a little bit more introverted than me, but just a very wholesome, grounded, smart, sharp, hardworking woman. And same with the father, the husband. He is just a grounded man. He puts his wife on a pedestal. He loves her. He's also very ambitious and very business savvy. And, just like I put it out there in terms of so much of what I've learned, like that, the father of that family, he's the CEO and founder of a company that's worth, last I spoke to them, over 150 million, which is crazy, and why I share that is because I was inside the home, way before like their current success or their current status, right? And I was inside of that home, like, really in the kids' home life. There's, 3 of them, and was really able to see what kind of life that I may want to build down the road. Now, was I thinking about this at the age of 18? Definitely not. But was I thinking about it at the age of 24 or 25, a little bit after I got out of school and everything? Yes. And it's something I talk about now, right? Like 10 years later, like I talk about what I remember seeing and experiencing and feeling inside that home. And what I also saw subconsciously was, in some ways, like, I saw by example of, what it's like for a couple, for, husband and wife, for them to lead their family in different ways, for them to also have teamwork, pour into the pot, and really just be in grind mode. And yeah, for me, that was one part-time job that I had. And then the next part-time job I had was I coached figure skating, which I still do today, which is a little bit more for my own sanity and my own interests and whatever. But that was also something I did during school. And then on the other hand, like eventually I went on to do like unpaid internships for experience and college credit and all of that, right? And so what I've seen a lot of people do, both in my own peers and also the younger folks who are still in school, right? If you're listening and you have this opportunity to still be in college, like this is hugely going to impact you. But what I've seen people do is kind of just dilly dally and not really take advantage of the chapter and position that they're in. And so that's why I emphasize this a lot is this is a huge opportunity to take advantage of and something that I did do that helped me get ahead. And before I move on to the second thing, I will say that my driving factor at the time was simply because I saw, again, this I was living in Southern California, so that's Los Angeles, area. And what I saw over there was a lot of creators, especially YouTubers specifically. If we're going back like 10 years ago, a lot of people in the YouTube industry were very much in LA and even Orange County where I was living. But I saw this possibility of, oh, wow, there is a 19-year-old girl doing YouTube and she's also in college, but she's making, like already a salary worth of income for the year, while she's in school. And I very much saw that as something that I could see myself doing as well. And so I was so determined at that age to find a way to make that my potential reality as well. And I knew it wasn't going to be overnight because girls that I was watching at the time when I was 19, they had been doing YouTube for 5 or 7 years at that point. And so I was thinking, okay, well, time to put in the work now, And again, I wasn't actually, yes, believe it or not, I did try YouTube for a period of my time, but it wasn't my niche. But that being said, again, that's an example of my number one tip here, which is try everything and anything as much as you can, because the more data, the more information you have about yourself and your interests and what you are good at, the easier it is to pivot and make decisions that are closer to the direction that you actually want to go in. The second thing that I did in my early 20s that I would do again if I was in that position is that I spent a great amount of time exploring Emily, myself, and just really learning to understand myself and my interests, even while I was in a relationship at the time. And I share this with an emphasis of the fact that I know it's very easy and common to fall into the pattern of getting too enmeshed with your boyfriend or partner, whoever. And not only am I speaking about that from experience from the first half of my 4-year relationship during college, but I'm also speaking about this from conversations with people that I know who only learned about that aspect after the fact, like way later into their late 20s or even early 30s. Like they realized that they never gave enough time for their individual self, which is going to need to be developed at some point. So you might as well develop it while you are in your 20s. One of the reasons why I'm so glad that I did that, which is like pursue my own interests and explore those curiosities, is because as I grew in my 20s, I was going in the direction of my life towards things that really interested Emily. It wasn't things that my parents recommended. It wasn't things that I saw my friends doing. It wasn't things that my university recommended. It was focused on what I knew about myself. And look, I've done somewhat extreme things to some people, such as solo traveling while I was in college. I did, a lot of day trips by myself. And let me be clear, it's not necessarily because I wanted to solo travel, although that became an interest of mine by the end of senior year. But it was more two reasons. Number one, because I didn't quite have the friends to do some of these things with, even a day trip. But number two, I started to realize like I was just so curious about different things. Like I went to Portland, Oregon for the first time in the fall of 2018. And I went because I was curious and I just knew, number one, what college friend is going to have the means or desire to just randomly go up there for the fall, right? So I'm not going to wait. But number two, I just realized like, hey, life is short, So I decided to go. But also in terms of just like life is short, I realized like, hey, the worst thing you're going to feel is just what it normally feels like to be by yourself, you know? And I think I wanted to embrace that feeling rather than run away because I'm scared to be alone, or because I'm scared to, not have friends go with me, right? It's okay to do some of that. So, spending time with yourself and exploring your interests and passions and your potential career. I mean, that's already kind of what I spoke about in the first one, but I think just really learning to understand yourself and spend enough time in solitude, that is 100% something that I highly recommend and something that really pushed me forward, especially when it comes to when people ask me, oh, how did you decide to move to New York? Or how did you sign a lease by yourself? Like all of these questions, you guys, I wouldn't be exactly where I am right now without those experiences that I just talked about when I was in my early 20s. And I'm talking like these are things that I did from the ages of like 20 to 24, 25 and ongoing, but in terms of when I started to actually apply some of this in my life, I think the first year was right around the age of 20, 21 years old. So if you notice deep down that you don't have your own life, separate from a partner or separate from your friends and roommates, and you can feel the way that makes you feel a little bit insecure in whatever capacity, I encourage you to start little by little to go and do things on your own and not randomly, right? Just go to the things that make you curious. You find a cute coffee shop on Instagram and you want to go check it out. Don't wait for a friend to come with you. Just go. Go check it out. Bring a book. Dress cute, and if you're single, maybe you'll meet someone, or maybe you'll meet a potential new friend, right? Maybe you'll meet another girl there that's also there by herself. Because if I was there by myself and I saw another girl there by herself and she kind of looked like my vibe, great chance I will probably go up to her and be like, hey, do you live around here, right? And I will just introduce myself and make a potential friend. Again, so many different ideas for you guys, but yes, if no matter what age or stage you're at in life, just give it a try and go little by little and give yourself grace. The third and final thing that I did in my early 20s that I would also repeat again is investing in lifelong friendships and relationships. I share this a lot, and I've shared this in the past as well, but I fundamentally believe that the foundation of our happiness and our fulfillment in life is through connection. And that without the people in our life, it would not have the same meaning. And I realized this at the age of 20, which is why I had the name What Fulfills You, that question. I decided I would turn that into a brand and a podcast. And why that is because, well, again, you can only speak about things that you experience. And when I went through my first breakup and ultimately first heartbreak, it was profound and so shattering that I felt those very difficult emotions that we're all often scared to face. The loneliness, the sadness, all of it. And I was sitting there in my junior year apartment, just thinking to myself, what am I missing? Why am I so unhappy? Why do I feel this way? And that's when I went down a rabbit hole of a concept called podcasts. And I soon enough came across Tony Robbins and was like, wow, a lot of his content is resonating with me. And I remember one of the most impactful conversations he had. For some reason, it was the most impactful for me. I was listening to this around like early January of 2018. And I was listening to the conversation between Ray Dalio and Tony Robbins on the Tony Robbins podcast, and ended up buying Ray Dalio's book, Principles, which I think actually or principle, which released at the time, right around, so I purchased it right around the time it came out. And this was like before it became even like a recommendation on people's lists. Like I just read it and I was a junior in college. And all that to say, through my own ways of discovery, I realized that the reason I was so unhappy and I felt that aspect of loneliness, whether you're physically or not physically alone, that's a separate story. But loneliness is separate from whether you are physically alone or not, right? That's a mental thing. And why I was there is because I had no meaningful or deep connections at that time of my life. And so I set out an intention and goal that year and for the years to come to build that, because I was starting from zero. So I had nothing to lose. And in that approach, I decided that, as cheesy as this might sound, I want to have friends that could be potentially my bridesmaids in my future wedding, right? And what does that mean? Well, that probably should mean that they embody similar values. It should probably mean that there's a characteristic about them that just will last for years to come. And now, can you predict that necessarily? Not really, but when I look back at all of my friendships from the time I made that intention, which is around the age of 20, right before I turned 21, to now, all of the friends that I still have from that chapter and moving forward, not only are they all still in my life, but as I connect the dots looking back, I can see why. I can see why because, yes, there are overlapping values and overlapping interests, and there are overlapping ways of being, and there are overlapping views about the world. And mind you, there are also differences, okay? We're not, like a carbon copy of each other, but I share this because I have been there when I had no one. And now I am sitting in much more abundance of friendships and people to reach out to and for people to connect with and for people to be there for me. And I wouldn't be able to say that without having done the thing that I said that I did, which was, to finally seek those types of relationships. And I remember times where I came across potential friends and, even friends that I thought could be like, semi-meaningful. And then they decided to kind of all like back out of my 21st birthday brunch. And that's when I realized like, okay, you probably aren't necessarily a friend that I'm going to have around for a while. So that's when I also started to keep my distance from certain people when I look back into my college years. And look, that is okay. That is normal. And that is part of the process, but there is so much joy that I have now and over the years from building these relationships. And so many of them came randomly. Of course, I had the privilege of meeting quite a few of them at my college, but I've met a lot after, from coworkers to mutual friends to business friends and entrepreneur friends to random people that reach out to me on Instagram and I end up vibing with them, all of it. And I highly, highly urge you, especially, I think that one is probably the most meaningful to me, which is investing in meaningful long-term connections, because that goes a long way. And I'm a firm believer in chosen family. I believe that the people that, even though they're just your friends, so to speak, are also family to you, and that they would treat you like family and vice versa. I believe in that wholeheartedly because I didn't grow up with a big family and, blood family that I think I could really connect to, not only from a cultural lens and generational lens, but also values lens, right? I think so many of that I didn't quite have, and that's okay, and that's why I realized, I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. Instead, I'm going to create that. I'm going to create the thing that I aspire to have. and I'm going to seek that and I'm going to embody it, because you can't have the things that you want and you can't quote unquote attract that unless you really embody it. I believe that like attracts like. You can attract an equal. So think about that. No matter where you are at in life, maybe you have a few good friends and you're like, I'm set. Like, hey, I'm not saying that you have to go make new friends, but I'm also saying don't just close off just because you already have a solid group of 3 or 4 people in your life. You just never know where some connections can take you. There are just a lot of great people out there with big hearts and wanting to also create that same deep, meaningful connection. And so when you put that intention out into the ether and you really embody that energy, I believe that you will draw people closer to you who are also looking for that. So that's what I would tell my younger self. And hey, I know my younger self did those things, but that's why I'm repeating that now, because I would go back and redo those things again. And I know that if I just redid those 3 things specifically, I would be in a very, very close position to where I'm at right now, if not just at the same position, Again, other things that I've done in my life throughout my early mid 20s has helped me to be where I am right now, but those 3 that I shared today are for sure fundamentally the reasons why I am. So I hope that was helpful and insightful for you. If this episode was valuable, please be sure to let me know. I love hearing your thoughts. You can DM me on Instagram at What Fulfills You or at Emily E. Duong. And if you haven't reviewed the podcast yet, it would mean the world. You can just give it a quick 5 stars on Spotify or Apple, wherever you listen. And by the way, I love feedback as well. So if there are certain things you would like to tweak or give me some critical feedback, please, I'm open. Just let me know. And thank you again for tuning in and sharing this with a friend or friends that you think would also help them. I love you guys so much, and I would chat with you all in the next episode.